Hi, Tadia. I hope this one has audio. My goodness, I told 25 minutes of stories directly to you, and there was no audio. Do not get old. This stuff happens, you know what I mean? So I'm thrilled that you love the Grazin album, and I'm thrilled with your comments, particularly about Eli's Coming, because that is the most special cut I have ever produced. Now, I had very little to do with that, in that Clarence McDonald did the vocal charts, the group sang their asses off, Ray Cork did an arrangement that was just in heaven, Max Bennett played an amazing part on bass. I'm glad you like that track. It's my favorite track I've ever produced in terms of showing off. That's a show-off track. There's a lot going on in that. Okay, let's go back to the Grazin album itself, and I'll tell you stuff that's behind the scenes that you might enjoy. Okay, it's 1968. I'm a staff producer at RCA. They've given me 1 year to find an act and have a hit, and I haven't found an act until I found the Friends of Distinction at a showcase at the Daisy nightclub in Beverly Hills. I heard them sing Grazin' in the Grass and just wanted them badly. I said, this is the act for me. So I begged Harry Elston, the writer of Grazin' in the Grass and the lead singer of it, and co-founder of the group, please take a chance on this young 22-year-old rookie from Arizona. I just left college, and here I am asking a Jim Brown managed group, that's the former NFL Hall of Fame football player who was managing them, I'm asking these guys to take a chance on me. Well, I'm glad they did. So let's get back in time a year prior, and I'm introduced to Ray Cork in Phoenix. And Ray Cork was a wonderful bass player who, by the way, could play both bass and trumpet at the same time in various groups around town. Okay, so we met, we hit it off. I had him do an initial date on a singer, Ronnie David, and we had the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra people, and the most gorgeous ballad and arrangement I had ever heard at that point. I thought, oh my goodness, this guy is really good. This is Ray Cork. Then we did a rock band here in Phoenix called Phil Mata and Peanut Butter, and they had a Cat Stevens song called Kitty. So now that Ray and I have cut a couple of tracks and RCA comes a-callin', I asked Ray to move over to LA and orchestrate the Friends of Distinction album, which would be the Grazin album, Grazin' in the Grass. So Ray joined me down in South Los Angeles, little home down there with a piano. Clarence McDonald is seated at the piano. He went on to fame as not just a studio pianist, but also arranger, producer, conductor. Google Clarence McDonald. He passed away a couple years ago, and it kind of breaks my heart. This guy's a genius. He did the Friends vocal charts. So Ray and I showed up at that little house down in South LA. I brought my recording equipment and basically recorded almost the whole album as you hear it, live around a piano just to see what was happening. The Friends already had all of this material in place. The only song I brought them for this album was Baby I Could Be So Good at Loving You. Other than that, they had them all rehearsed, they had them all vocal arranged, and they were ready to go. I cannot stress enough how valuable a talented vocal arranger like Clarence McDonald is. Okay, the Friends had others since Clarence left after the Grazin album, but nothing comes close to the intricacy and the beauty of what he did. Now, what you need to know is that the Friends of Distinction were originally the Hi-Fis. That was what they called themselves, the Hi-Fis, and they were a jazz-leaning group. I think you'll hear on the Grazin album that the album does have some jazz leanings. And it's the Grazin album alone that showcases that, because after that, with the various producers they had, everything they did was slanted pop, for pop music. I miss the Hi-Fis. I miss Lonesome Mood, if you hear that ballad track on the Grazin album. Lonesome Mood was the only track on the album where the voices were doubled. Okay, that means the group sang it twice, so it would have more fullness to their sound. But with all the other tracks, no, they weren't doubled. They were done just the way the group would sing it around the piano in South LA, and you had a lead singer on one microphone and the group on the other microphone, and for the most part, they sang them all the way through as you hear them. I don't remember punching much of anything in. That means correcting stuff after the fact. We didn't do much of that. And I remember when the Fifth Dimension came to me 5 years later, they said, we would like to do less of doubling of our vocals. And I said, that's great. I would love to do that with you. That's what I did on the Grazin album. We left it raw, so to speak. We left it bare because that's how they sounded. That's how they sounded in the club. That's how they sounded around the piano. And that's how they sound on the Grazin album. It's natural. It's pure. It isn't all gimmicked up the way we started doing as of the Highly Distinct album and then the albums that followed. Okay, so you say, now where did those studio musicians come from that you had on the Grazin album? Truth be told, the only musician I chose for that date was Jim Gordon. Rick Gerard, my fellow producer at RCA, showed me Jim Gordon and said, I think he's the best drummer in town, John. And I said, well, I would tend to agree with you. I want him on my stuff. And I hadn't even produced a record yet. So Jim Gordon is the only one I chose. The person responsible for choosing all the other musicians wasn't Ray or John or the Friends or Clarence. It was Ben Barrett, who was a former prize fighter, and he was a contractor. He and Bobby Helfer were the two contractors in LA. And what contractors do is they hire the musicians for you for the date. So Ben Barrett selected all those musicians, including Max Bennett and King Arison on congas. I mean, just crucial to our record. But what I found interesting was the guitarist who was playing backbeats like chick, chick, chick with the drummer. That was Howard Roberts, the famous jazz guitarist. We'd get ready to go on break on the Grazin sessions, and all of a sudden you hear this, and I say, my God, that's Howard Roberts. And then he'd come back for us and go, chick, chick, chick. Oh my goodness, my hero is reduced to playing backbeats. But see, credit where credit's due is I'm new in town. I didn't know who to hire. Ben hired him, and he did a great job. I'm very thankful for that. Before we started recording, I gathered the rhythm players together, and I did it with the strings and brass as well, and I said, I think we're producing something special here with this album, so please give it everything you've got. This could be great. And I meant that. It wasn't just because it was my first project. I felt that the mix of tunes and styles that we had on this album would really be special. Now again, Ray Cork was doing stuff that only Tom Bell back in Philadelphia was doing at the same time with the Sounds of Philadelphia acts. Ray used, for instance, on I Really Hope You Do, there's 3 piccolos. What? Had he told me that in advance, I'd say, are you out of your mind? We're using 3 piccolos? They sound great. On Lonesome Mood, we had fuzz guitar and muted trumpets. What? That was great too. Who would have ever thought of that? Ray, Raymond Cork Jr., genius. And the way Ray's arrangements were scored, almost every note was written other than ad-lib sections. Now that's really kind of unusual. Most arrangers in town would just show the drummers the basic beat they were to play and where there was supposed to be a fill and stuff like that. But you know, on Sweet Young Thing Like You that Harry Elston sings on, Jim Gordon is playing da 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 da. Everything's written. In our days, we called those fly specks because the pages, the music pages, were like fly specks on a wall. There were all these notes, and the players had to play them. Ray wrote everything down except for fills. And I remember Max Bennett saying on one of our dates, this is unplayable. This one lick here that you wrote, you can't play this on an electric bass. It's unplayable. And Ray said, give me your axe, Max. And Max handed over his electric guitar. Ray played the lick perfectly, and Max said, oh, that's how you do it. Great. Well, I can do that. Of course he could do that. But Ray was doing innovative stuff that nobody in town was doing. My dear friend Perry Botkin Jr., rest in peace, who arranged Lover Let Me Be Lonely on the Friends of Distinction session that Ray Cork produced, Perry told me, he said, John, your friend Ray Cork is one of only 2 or 3 people here in town that arrange way outside the box. It's like a creative fountain of youth. There are only 2 or 3 people like that. The rest of us are just doing professional work, stuff like you're used to hearing. Okay, but when you get Ray Cork, you don't know what you're going to hear. And that's what made him so brilliant. Now, between you and me, Ray came to me after the Grazin album and said, I really don't want to arrange anymore. I'll do these charts on highly distinct, but I think the well is dry. I've pretty much spent what statements I had to say. I've pretty much done them all now. By the way, the intro on the tune Grazin in the Grass are the trumpet licks. Da 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 da. Ray was so insecure about that being his first big Hollywood session that he wrote 2 more alternatives to that intro. So when we came to the orchestra dates for the Grazin album, there were 3 different intros for Grazin in the Grass, but it's the first one that stuck, and that's the one you hear on all the TV commercials for many, many, many years. It's currently on an Airbnb ad, if you've seen that on television lately. Now, the thing that I really have to stress is that I worked in the business for several years. I produced a lot of artists that back in the day you might have heard of. Nothing was special. Nothing I ever did was as special as the Grazin album. That was magic. Utter magic. I would spiritually say that's your higher power session if you're a 12-step person. Because the right vocal arranger with the right musicians, with the right vocal group, with the right material, and I'll throw in producer as well, just to not be, to be totally humble, but for the most part, all I had to do was make sure there weren't any clams. That means bad notes. And of course, I had to mix it, but that's okay. That's all right. It was the gathering of people and their creativity that made an album that didn't sound like anything else on the market at that time. This fusion of jazz and pop, not doubled vocals, and a very intimate style with a lot of interesting orchestra instruments and amazing out-of-the-box creativity by Raymond Cork Jr. I miss you, Ray. Okay, so we mixed the album, we put the record out, and within 3 or 4 months, the promotion man for RCA Los Angeles comes to me and says, there's not a thing happening with that record. It's a good record, John, this Grazin in the Grass, but you're going to have to get the next one ready. And I said, okay, I'll do that. But in the meantime, my friend back here in Arizona, Pat McMahon, who is a media legend back here, at that stage of his career, he was Program Director of the Year for radio. That's Billboard's Promotion Man of the Year for radio at Radio KRIZ, the rock station here in town. Pat, with no nudging from me whatsoever, took a chance on Grazin in the Grass, and he was the first major market program director to play that record in the marketplace. And when he did, there was great audience reaction, and then everybody started picking up on it. So I didn't have to get the next one ready. How cool is that? And Pat's a lifelong friend. Before then and well after then. We were in business a couple times together, and I love him dearly. And I would not have had a record career without Pat McMahon breaking Grazin in the Grass. It pretty much could have been over for me right then if Grazin hadn't been a hit record. Okay, so it goes gold, and then for the follow-up, I foolishly put out the wrong cut, a Willie Hutch tune that Willie did the vocal arrangements on, and he was an artist for me at RCA at the time, but that was not a good choice. But there's this B-side called Going in Circles. It's a 4-minute 6/8 ballad, and radio's not going to play anything that's that long of a tune, and a 6/8 ballad on top of it. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. I remember when we cut the rhythm track for Going in Circles that I said to Ray after we put the vocals on, Ray, this thing just doesn't have any energy. Don't you think we ought to shelve it for now? And Ray said, John, I got an idea for the orchestration that could save this track. And boy, did he. You got me going in circles, bump, 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 all round and round I go. I'm spun out over you, whatever. Ha! He was right. And I remember hearing a KHJ, that's the #1 station in LA, disc jockey say, massive orchestra behind the Friends of Distinction. No. We had no budget, so we had 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. But Ray made it sound big by what he wrote, by the notes he wrote. Oh my goodness. And the orchestration saved that track altogether, and we had our second gold record in a row. Okay, so that as you know, RCA pressured us to do a follow-up album, and we weren't ready. The group wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. The group was on the road a lot. They didn't have time to rehearse new material. And we really felt we had more singles that were possible off the Grazin album. For instance, I Really Hope You Do. If you take out the 3 piccolo do vocal thing and just make it a tighter cut, I believe that's a hit single. And I believe Eli's Comin' was potentially a Grammy nominee. If you take Grazin in the Grass, a very up-tempo and catchy track, and follow that with a 6/8 ballad that was 4 minutes long, oh my goodness, then you want to come up-tempo again. So you come with Eli's Comin', and that is going to knock some people's socks off. That's either going to be a big hit or an utter bomb, but we should have tried it, and RCA wouldn't listen to us. The follow-up to Eli's Comin' would have been I Really Hope You Do, which, without the triple piccolo and do section, I believe was a hit record. Then we could have had a second album, but RCA wouldn't listen to us, and they kind of got greedy. They wanted a new album, they wanted more sales. Now the irony is that RCA didn't sell many albums. They weren't very good at it. Warner Brothers was selling 10 times, 100 times more albums than RCA was. RCA was a singles, a 45 leaning company, as was Bell Records, where I went next. Bell Records didn't sell albums like the other guys. They sold singles like Tony Orlando and Dawn with Knock 3 Times and Candida and Tie a Yellow Ribbon, So to wrap all these stories up, I believe the Grazin album had a couple more singles and could have endured and become even more of a classic that I feel it is too. I have made a lot of records for a lot of acts, and they, for the most part, have always sounded slick and professional, but nothing was ever magic. This project was magic. And I'm so glad, Tadia, that you recognize that. And it means a lot to me that you were able to verbalize it. Okay, that's it for now. I love you guys. You take care. If you want to, hit like on this clip and or subscribe. And I'll see you next time. You guys take care. Bye-bye.